Hey, hello everyone. Hello everyone online. Thank you so much for coming along to our Green Research Software Engineering Special Interest Group Birds of a Feather session. Just such a long title. The idea behind this session is to kind of hear from some people working in sustainability in across the RSE field, wider field as well. And also to kind of get some feedback from yourself as a community around what the green RSE SIG can be doing and should be doing over the next time. Before I start, I should say that Sebastian is going to take some photos for us. If you don't want to be in any photos, I think anyone with an orange lanyard doesn't want to be photographed, but if there's any problems, then just let me know. It's just really useful to have a few photos for publicity apart from anything else. So yeah, thank you very much for doing that. So our agenda for the day, have a few different speakers. So I'm going to welcome an introduction. Then we are delighted to have Martin Farley joining us to talk about sustainability and research moving forward. Then we have a couple of talks more around the kind of RSE angle, and then we have talk on the use of green software on the HPC lesson. So we've got a pile of talks at the beginning, and then we've got an interactive session led by Joe, who is somewhere, there he is, who's going to kind of talk about training around green RSE, and then we're going to have some discussion sessions. You'll notice you've all got sticky notes in your table. Before I start, I wanted to kind of introduce the Green RSE Special Interest Group a little bit. So the society decided kind of somewhere about 18 months ago that special interest groups is a way of getting people from wider across the community to engage in particular projects and activities. There's lots of people that have interest within the wider community, and so it's kind of a structure that we can all kind of work together and come together to work on a common theme. So the Green RSE SIG was formed, we had our first event kind of at RSECon last year, which we kind of tried to kind of scope out what people would like in the community. And this is our kind of overall aims and ambitions. It's all kind of fairly straightforward in some ways. We exist to try and identify and promote best practices for environmentally responsible research software, to collaborate on solutions that improve energy efficiency of research code, advocate for green policies. So this is about kind of really coming together and having a collective voice. So how can we support the development of green policies by kind of joining together and advocate that for research institutions, funding bodies, and broader communities, and also to champion the role of RSE in reducing the environmental impact of research software. So I think RSEs are really, really well placed to be involved in this transition. So we've got, we know that we have to move towards net zero. We know that there's very high level kind of government strategies saying, oh, we need to move to net zero. We also know that we need research. So we need to make sure that research is as efficient as possible. It has the lowest environmental impact as possible. And we can help by doing that. We can help do that as RSEs because we're used to working with researchers that code, and we can use the kind of the skills and the knowledge that we have and kind of come together, see if we can help research move towards this net zero goal. So the way that we're structured around this kind of idea around greener principles. So this comes from a paper that Loic wrote called Greener Principles for Environmentally Sustainable Computational Science. And so this isn't specific, the original paper wasn't specifically for RSE, but what it did is it kind of gave a structure for people that are thinking about environmentally sustainable computational science. It's got a nice acronym, so the greener, each of the letters in greener stands for something. And so what we did is we took the greener principles for general software and we wrote the greener principles for research software engineering. And we're using these principles to kind of structure our thinking from the green RSE SIG. So green as a topic is massive, and it's really easy to kind of get overwhelmed by just this magnitude and the complexity of the situation. And so we kind of use this to kind of structure our thinking. So the greater principles for RSE, the first is around governance, to advocate for policies that maintain sustainability considerations in software funding, responsibility, to highlight and document the carbon cost of software and research outputs. Estimation, develop tools to measure and analyze energy consumption in software workflows. Energy efficiency, implement programming practices that minimize energy use. New collaborations, so this is where that kind of slightly falls down. So N for new collaborations, partner with diverse stakeholders to create greener solutions. So that's kind of all about kind of coming together. Education, providing training to the research community on sustainable computing. And research, so innovate with new techniques to lower the carbon footprint of research outputs. So you can see kind of how well RSEs are placed within this to kind of drive forward this change. So what we did last year is we had a birds of feather session, and we spoke to people, and we got people to kind of vote on these principles and kind of decide which were most kind of relevant to RSE, and to which we kind of call the low-hanging fruit, essentially, which are the ones that we can kind of start to achieve change on quite quickly. And so this is what we'll return to, what we'll visit later. So there's if you follow the QR code, there's a blog from our last year's session. But before we do that, we're going to move on to some invited talks. I'm going to check with the Zoom. Are our invited speaker, is he here? Yeah, fantastic. Can the online people hear well? Is there any complaints in the chat?
I think so. I'll check.
Okay, I'm assuming the lack of complaints is fine.
Should have taken my laptop. Anyway. All right. So
the program. Like this one.
Should we just?
Found it yesterday.
Okay, people shout in the chat if you can't hear us online. So I'll just introduce the next speaker, who is Martin Farley. Martin, if you can hear us, you can.
Yeah, I can put on my talk.
Oh, I think it's our side problem. Yeah, if you want to put your camera on. Too many screens.
Too many screens.
Camera's on. I'll.
I see you.
Yeah, feel free to share. So Martin started in sustainability, working on wet lab sustainability. You may know him from creating the LEAF framework and the Lean network. But for a couple of years now, I think he's moved on to UKRI to be the Associate Director for Environmental Sustainability. And so kind of leading this research sustainability framework and providing a funder's perspective. So we thought it would be useful to see where the funder's head is at, and leading on this kind of exciting Spark Hub update, which will have a whole digital computational component. So yeah, I'll let him talk about that. Martin, if you want to take it away.
Sure, and thank you for that. So greetings, folks. Apologies, my title there says Loic. I had some Zoom issues, so thank you for the assistance, Loic, on that. Always some digital issues. So for context, I work at UKRI, UK Research and Innovation. We have a net zero target for ourselves, which focuses on our own estate. Research is resource intensive, as we know. It's a challenge to get there, of course, but that includes our digital research infrastructure. Some work has been done on that, but we have a lot more to do. Now, one of the good drivers for us is the Concordat. UKRI is a signatory of this. You might be aware of the Concordat, but most research-intensive universities and organizations around the UK are signatories of this, and sets out some broad aims. And we are not alone in this in mainland Europe. There is the Heidelberg Agreement, which also is other funders coming together to work on how we can address this. Now, other funders have started to put out sustainability policies, and we haven't put out one regarding our funding policy at UKRI. Some in the UK have, some in Germany, Austria have. There's a Greening Research Working Group, which is called Science Europe. Science Europe has a Greening Research Working Group, and it's essentially national funders and research performers coming together to say, what are we going to do around sustainability? And by the way, these policies actually take on different formats, I want to say. The UK ones have been focused on sort of becoming signatories or achieving wet lab certifications. The German and Austrian ones are more about asking people to address questions that get them thinking about their research, but they're not assessed. next to the research outcomes. And I actually think that's a really important distinction. Now, taking a step back, there is some guidance in some areas. By the way, this is not an exhaustive list, but UKRI funds a lot of different research activities. There is some good practice in computational research. And again, this is not, there should be more on here. But when we think about the individuals that we fund, they work in a wide gamut of activities, and some of them are cross-functional and quite dynamic. And one of the thoughts we had was that we wanted to try to bring together the sustainability guidance that existed. And I think that's important for us, because if we want to potentially consider a policy at UKRI, we have to ensure that there is a standard of what good looks like. If we want people to improve what they do in this space, we need to ensure they know how to do it. We can't just say, go and be more sustainable. I think, especially in these complex environments. So what we thought is that actually in the current state, there is a lack of sustainability guidance for some of the areas that we fund. And I mean, the breadth of activities that we fund, I'm not just focusing, but there is good practice around computational research. Although, like in a lot of areas, it's being developed as well. For some of the activities that we fund, there are issues around open access, so not all of it is accessible. Some of it is behind paywalls. And then we also had thoughts about the governance or stewardship for this content. So who is deciding what good looks like? Are we, is it a third party? Is it a company? Or is there a transparent process to determining it? And I like that. I know health and safety is sometimes drier, but within health and safety, there is a process to determine what we consider safe, and we trust in that process. One other consideration we had, so we couldn't just ask grant applicants open questions about sustainability and not assess them. That goes against the principle of the bureaucracy review, which is that we don't want to add too much bureaucracy. If we're going to ask a question, we have to assess against it. So in that sense, we have to support the assessment process. So at least right now, I thought we could not yet integrate environmental sustainability within our funding. That took us to what we're working on now. And I think this is part of at least a 3-year plan of how we engage with this. But the idea was to start a resource where people can come to and get sustainability guidance for a variety of activities. A lot of the people that do computational research might not just be working around computers. They might be biophysicists, they might be chemists. So we wanted there to be guidance for the breadth of activities. And it's not that we need to necessarily host everything. We can signpost a lot of it, but the idea is that you could come to this site, you could say what different type of activities you're doing, and you could get guidance for your research activities on how to be more environmentally sustainable. It would work at group and institutional level, and I'll get to that. And the idea is that there's a peer auditing system that's circular, with a percentage that are randomly checked. The other idea is that it's going to be supported by funders around Europe. And I'll just put this on, which is the governance model. I won't sit on this too long because we're still in negotiations, although we have a lot of good support for it. But the idea is that multiple funders invest, and then we have an academic review board that provides the stewardship for the content, and there's an application process, et cetera, to manage it. So I think there's a lot of benefits to this model. I'm biased, but the idea is that there's a common idea of what good looks like that we can reference. People can get certified through it, but if they don't want to as well, they can just access the good content because it's open access. There can be calculators either hosted or referenced. If people build calculators for different specialist activity, tricky thing with calculators is always what are the units of measurement, I have to say, in terms of carbon assessment, without going too long into that. But you can, are you doing the calculation of a project, of a site, of a group, of an individual, what is your unit? Sorry, but that's a tangent. So a lot of benefits to that, and that's just a bit of a summary slide on this. So the idea is that we have a single site, a bit of content curation, supported by multiple funders, open access, and potentially can host training calculators. and standard actions and certifications. Reference them too if they exist in other sites. Now, we've started to build the website, and this is what it looks like. This is some content that we put on for actually diagnostics, which is something we're working on with the NHS, but the idea is that you can come here, you get different actions, and you get references and resources, and you can understand the impact of it and be assessed against it. But yeah, that's the idea of the site, and it's going up, and we were doing a lot of workshops and consultations. So by the way, if anybody has any thoughts about if this is the good approach, bad approach, or if they want to get involved, this is always just an open call. You can reach out, you can get involved about either the content curation model or the website itself, or not just the content curation model, but the content itself. If there's something that you've done that you want referenced in here, please do let us know, because right now is when we're just more putting everything on. But we had a lot of feedback also that we need to consider the organizations. And I think, you know, I think we hear this as well with compute, you know, is that you don't run the facilities necessarily, or some of you might, but so there was a need for institutional recommendations around supporting sustainable research. And some of this is around IT, but a lot of it is just your procurement. So actually, procurement's one of those areas that relates a lot to compute. So whether you purchase hardware or services, are we engaging these suppliers in a similar manner? I really want to emphasize that's a really important one. The NHS is the inspiration for this. They have a supplier roadmap where they're saying how they're going to engage their suppliers for the next 5 to 10 years, to say, this is what we ask for in sustainability now, but this is what we will ask for, so that suppliers can get ready for that and adapt and understand how they can improve with us. We work with the sector in that way. And I think that's actually really important for the purchase of, be it cloud services or hardware or whatever it is that we're purchasing around compute. We need to highlight what we will ask for and ask for in a consolidated manner. So this is some of the content that we're putting on, and some of the content we were talking about potentially can come from some of the good work around Green Disc. But there's also a lot of other specialist areas in here that we've been working on, so that if you want content, you can find it for a breadth of research activities. And I want to highlight that we also were looking at, by the way, I'm my understanding and journey of understanding what training is out there. I am at the beginning stages, but the point is that we will need, I think, training content for sustainable computing and specifications. And in part, that's why I'm on the advisory board for NetDrive, which actually has a call right now if anybody's interested for a community activity. And some of the funding out there is supposed to support either assessing what training is out there or some of the things listed there. So I wanted to highlight that. So in case anybody's interested. And the last thing I just want to mention, which I just think is an interesting point, which is about environmental impact statements. Certifications can't solve everything. And we can have groups that are certified, but maybe do science or research that isn't as efficient or impactful as we'd like. So we've had recommendations to consider putting guidance out on environmental impact statements, so that when people apply for funds, they can show the value against carbon. And again, this is very early days, and we need to consult on this and et cetera. But we need to provide guidance for panels, organizations supporting researchers, and researchers themselves out there, because it's just to highlight that we need to recognize that some research is so specific as well that it doesn't lend itself to a certification. So we have a URL purchase, not live, but coming up, and we're uploading content, and we hope to launch a pilot next month. I will stop there, but I just want to say thank you very much for the opportunity to join. Again, apologies, my name is not Loic, but thank you for the help with my Zoom basics, and yeah, much thanks for the opportunity to speak today. Thank you, Kirsty.
Thank you so much. That was really interesting. So we're going to try and do questions via Slido if you've got a few minutes to stick around. So we have a Slido link. If you join at rse.con, RSECon25, and then we are in track E0.01. while everyone's doing that, do we have any kind of live questions from the room to break the slider rules? So, no. Okay. I'll kick off with one. So I think the training thing's very interesting in terms of it feels like such a wide range of skills to train people on when we're all researchers and research software engineers are already quite busy. I wonder how we can kind of just navigate all the kind of all the different competing interests and competing challenges that people have in this field. Do you think we can kind of go down a kind of almost like learning pathways or kind of some kind of continuous professional development scope? I just wonder how you would kind of encourage us to kind of frame our thinking about that. Sorry, it was a really rambly question, but do you have any thoughts on how we can kind of navigate that?
I mean, so I think just to start, so we get this question in UKRI about general training around sustainability, but like I think we start with accessible bite-sized forms for different audiences, just to improve and upskill the basics. And we were looking at the different categories around compute because not everybody you can't group everybody together. There's people that are developers or software engineers or the facilities managers, as opposed to your average user, might fall into different categories. But I think we wanted to start with short form basics, in part just because everybody's busy, and you mentioned competing interests in there. So, you know, and some of this might exist, I have to say, but we for some other areas that are not related to computer engineering or software, that there was some short form training out there that seemed to work well. In terms of career development, there's longer versions potentially, but I think to start, we just wanted to get the short form basics together.
Yeah, that makes total sense. Thank you. I would put money on who asked this question. We've got one anonymous one. So a key principle of environmental sustainability is the reduction of consumption. Are UKRI considering reducing their spending and level of research they fund to hit the 1.5-degree target?
So, well, I think there is. That's not how we're looking at. I think also, sorry, spend is not directly related to the 1.5-degree target. To be completely, you know, the way that we achieve net zero as an organization is not by completely stopping spend. To be frank, I think that's that connection, I would say, I might challenge. I think we've looked at net zero plans, and some of them require systemic change, but some of them require investment. So I would, refute that. I understand the concept of doing less as being a way to address, our challenge with climate change, but I think that's not the way we want to go about it. We still want the benefits of research. You know, research does a lot of good, and I don't think we want to just stop research for that target, and I don't think we could. So I think some of it requires innovation, but we actually have a lot of solutions on what we need to do systemically to decarbonize a lot of the things that we do. And compute is quite, electricity heavy, and we have some pathways that we know, even if we're slight, the UK, to where it says it wants to be in terms of decarbonization of the grid. But so sorry, I've gone on a bit too long on that, but I think there are ways to do it that don't require just stopping spend.
Yes, no, that makes sense. One very last short one to finish with. Oh, it's disappeared. Oh yes, no, there is. How will Spark Hub tie in with existing initiatives such as the Digital Humanities Climate Coalition?
I've seen the Digital Humanities Climate Coalition. I think it's a great site that we can reference, and I think the Spark Hub can either reference good sites or find a way to put it into an actionable, so like a mechanism to show that you've taken part and engaged with it. So, some of the learnings from that, you take part, you engage, and then you show it so that if you apply for a relevant grant, you can say that you've engaged with it. So it's about the mechanism yeah, great website though.
Cool. Right. Thank you so much. Thank you for your time. That was a really interesting talk and a great way to start our session. So thank you.
Thank you.
We are pleased to have Wahab here, who's going to talk about Isambard's and how to kind of calculate the carbon or the kind of supercomputer emissions from our new Isambard supercomputer. So thank you very much.
See that works. Great. Hello, everyone. I'm Wahab. I'm an infrastructure engineer, part of Bristol Centre for Supercomputing. I'll be talking about the work by a master's student that we've had. And basically, Kirsty earlier showed the different things that we can do to start working on green RSE, and part of those is estimation. And this very much focuses on estimating emissions from jobs that run on HPC systems. So like I said, all this work is done by Elliot Ailiff, who is an MSc we've had in Bristol Centre for Supercomputing. I've had no background in green RSE or sustainability, but through Loic and Andy Turner's work, I've been able to kind of enable our student to be able to do this research on Isambard supercomputers. So I'll talk a bit about background and specifications of our systems. And then we're going to compare a CPU supercomputer with a GPU supercomputer, talking about scope 3 or embodied emissions and scope 2 or operational emissions. And then at the end, we'll discuss the different ways to measure emissions from a job. So we have two systems. Isambard AI is focused for AI training. Each node has 4 CPUs and 4 GPUs. So that's the GH200 chip from NVIDIA. And there's 1,320 nodes, I believe. Isambard 3 is a CPU HPC, more traditional, still with an ARM CPU. It has 2 CPUs per node. And there's, how many nodes are in Isambard 3? I should have put this down.
Isambard 3. There's 55,000 cores.
55,000 cores. Okay, divided by 2 to get the number of nodes. In terms of carbon intensity, so we pay for, DSET, UKRI pay for clean renewable carbon credits for Isambard. So essentially we're paying for just solar and wind, not nuclear or any other source. But we'll report with location-based reporting. It's a bit confusing what you pay for and what you get. But our certificates are 0 grams of CO2 per watt. But we'll be reporting the data from the carbon intensity API for the Southwest England region. Isambard AI is 4th on the Green 500 in terms of sustainability. We'll talk about the measurements, and at the end we'll talk about why it's so efficient. So we'll start with scope 3. So these are the emissions that were made when building the system. Using kind of open estimates, we can see on the left is the embodied emissions. The top row is for Isambard AI for the GPU cluster. The bottom row is for Isambard 3 or the CPU cluster. We can see that when making the system, most of the emissions come from the storage. So Isambard AI at the top has 27 petabytes of SSDs, and that results in about 60% of the emissions when you're manufacturing the system. For Isambard 3 has less storage, so it's a smaller fraction of the emissions. But when we're actually running the systems, most of the emissions come from the CPU and the GPU. In terms of scope 2, so when we're actually running the system, we'll start with a CPU benchmark, or CPU and GPU benchmark, but a more traditional HPC benchmark or LINPACK, which is what's used to kind of rank the systems. On the left, we can see the kilograms of CO2 per hour of running a node. So we can see that the system with 4 CPUs and 4 GPUs is emitting a lot more. And on the right, we can see the kilograms of CO2 equivalent per teraflop of performance. And we can see that GPUs are about 7 times more efficient in terms of emissions per teraflop. And then now we can look at an AI benchmark. So this is training a BERT model, very small synthetic benchmark. We're only using 1 CPU or 1 GPU in this instance, not a whole node. But we can test the speed and efficiency. So can people see my mouse? Yes. So this long gray bar here is the amount of time it takes, which is on the right-hand y-axis. And then in terms of emissions, we can see the CPU emits a lot less. So this is what happens if you run it on the CPU on the first bar on the left. On the right-hand side, we can run it on a CPU on a Isambard AI node. And because we have a GPU just sat there doing nothing, it's a lot less efficient. But it takes exactly the same amount of time. But when we do run it on the GPU, it's orders of magnitude faster. So the runtime is a log axis, and it's just much, much faster and much more efficient. In terms of tools to measure it, there's a lot of freely accessible tools that are available. Green algorithms and green algorithms HPC are available if you want a web interface or a CLI. There's Code Carbon, there's MLCO2 Impact, which will say, in case you're using Google Cloud, AWS or Azure, you can input which region you are, and it'll tell you how much emissions you're generating. And then our master students generated Grace HPC, which is a tool that we've been using in this talk. Most tools measure with usage-based estimation. So you say what GPU you're using, what CPU you're using, assume 100% utilization, and then you can calculate the emissions that you'll make. And then Elliot's compared kind of the accuracy of using power minute, PM counters, and usage-based estimation. On the left, we see CPU jobs. So both figures look quite similar, but the red dots are kind of below the black line. The blue dots are above the black line. So this is a Bland-Altman plot, if you're familiar. For a CPU benchmark, we find that usage-based estimates underestimate the amount of emissions by about 8%, or amount of energy usage, while for GPU usage, they overestimate. So these are synthetic benchmarks. So most of the time, our CPUs and GPUs are 100% utilization. I'm still not sure why for CPU we underestimate with usage-based methods. But for GPUs, we're likely overestimating because GPUs are rarely pinned at 100% because you need to spend a lot of time waiting for the CPU to move data across. But despite saying that, in CPU measurements, it's only 8% error, and for GPU, it's 11% error. So to conclude, it's difficult to access true Scope 3 emissions. That data is still not public. Location or market-based reporting of carbon intensity is kind of a bit confusing. And part of the reason that Isambard AI is much more efficient than Isambard 3 is that we're using GPUs and direct liquid cooling. Both systems use ARM, so that's why we're efficient as well. And then usage-based estimates are likely sufficient for code optimization and emission reporting. Part of the tool that Elliot's generated, because the previous talk mentioned about how we should report things. So this is for the master's project of all of the work that I showed you just now. This is quantifying the Scope 2 and Scope 3 emissions of using them. So the total energy consumed is about 31 kilowatt hours, and the total carbon footprint is about 7 kilograms of CO2 equivalent. But yeah, that's everything for now. Thank you, everyone.
So the first one we've got in is how do Scope 3 emissions from manufacturing a hard disk and an SSD compare?
I'm not actually sure. Does it? Yeah, Andy.
I can answer that. So a lot of research papers show, I think, probably about 10 times between spinning disk and SS and solid state storage.
In which direction?
So solid state's 10 times more body carbon than spinning disk.
More emitted carbon. Okay, that's pretty good to know.
So I think they're just coming in order. So can you use the same methodology for another system? How applicable is?
Yes, you can. So this just uses basically Slurm jobs. So it will run sect commands. If your system is using Slurm, it will look through all jobs submitted under that project. It will look through the time that the job was submitted and go through the carbon intensity API and look at the carbon intensity of the time that your job was submitted. And then all you have to do is kind of change the configuration of define what CPU you're using, what's the TDP of that CPU, and the GPU if you have one.
Okay.
Isn't AI or 3 powered entirely by the national grid? Some universities power their supercomputers using on-site energy generation, making energy consumption hard to calculate using mentioned tools. So I believe on-site generation is scope 1. We don't have any on-site energy generation, which is why we only report scope 2 and scope 3. But yes, I'm not currently aware of any tools that will include scope 1 energy generation, because that makes it more complicated. But yes, we are entirely powered by the national grid. Next question is, do you plan to make your embodied carbon data public? What framework was used to evaluate it? So our embodied carbon data is based on publicly available information. A lot of this is kind of by the manufacturers. There's a lot of manufacturers for the system that go in, but that data is usually not made public.
Thank you so much. I'm going to have to stop, but I presume you're happy to take questions after.
Yes, yeah, please come up. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you very much for inviting me to talk on this. I guess, so I just wanted to give an update on where with this green software use on HPC lesson that we've been developing to try and help people understand better emissions, particularly around HPC. Though I think a lot of the material in here is sort of more generally applicable to other DRI anyway as well. So stuff, logos, and actual text. So the idea originally was to try and develop some sort of open source training materials to introduce greenhouse gas emissions issues in the context of HPC systems. And part of because this came sort of via carpentries a bit, we follow the sort of standard carpentries methodology about thinking, well, who the audience, what are the learning outcomes, all that sort of thing. And one of the things we really wanted to do here was try and make some sort of training that was accessible to all HPC stakeholders. So rather than just RSEs or users, or the usual people we train around HPC, we want to make something that was much more accessible people who also run the system, also people who work, for example, the research councils in procuring HPC systems, because they have a key role to play as part of environmental sustainability in HPC, as do the users and the people running the system and things like that. So it was not aiming for a technical course on programming for emissions efficiency, though I accept that there's probably needs for such courses, and I'm not aware there's huge amounts of training in that area at the moment. So that might be something that's worth discussing in the next section. So just to acknowledge some people, it rose up discussions with various people at EPCC, within the society and the SSI and other people. So what we did was we took the existing open source green software practitioner course, which is quite sort of enterprise IT focused, and then tried to use the core material from there and then modify it to be more specific for HPC system. So the main topic areas this training covers is things. So the sort of excuse me, the core bits that were in the original Green Software Foundation course with these methods of where carbon emissions come from, so around energy efficiency, and how codes work with that, carbon awareness, and that's the introduction to the energy markets, demand shifting and demand shaping, and things like that. That if you want to know more about, then come on the course or go and have a look at it online. Hardware efficiency, and we've heard about embodied emissions already today, and then approaches for measuring emissions in a general sense, not in the sense of you go to Slurm and you get the data out of there, or you get it by this IPMI counter or something like that. More like you measure energy and then what you do with that to turn it into a metric for making decisions, and those sorts of things. And then some information about reducing emissions, difference between carbon neutral and net zero, which are often used interchangeably by people, although they're absolutely not. Difference in carbon abatement and reduction and offsets, and how those play in this sort of area, and approaches to reducing emissions for HPC systems. So this is the core of the course. It fits in one day, a short day, to allow the trainer potentially to travel to a location, give it, and then get home again to have the tea. And one of the key concepts I just wanted to highlight of the course was this HPC CI emissions metric. So this is HPC carbon intensity emissions metric, and the idea is completely stolen from the Green Software Foundation, who have a software CI measurement. And what you do is you take the bit we've talked about, people have talked about already, which is the operational emissions, the scope 2 emissions, which is the amount of energy used, times by the carbon intensity of the electricity generation, the embodied emissions M. And the trick you do is you take a functional unit R to turn it into a rate. And you do that for something that's useful for you. So if you're HPC software, it could be iterations, but it could be papers produced and output like that. And then that can tell you how to reduce your emissions and measure progress against it. And you can't use offsets here. You have to actually reduce the amount of carbon. It's one of the key things. So I think I'm sort of running out of time. I can't see what Kirsty is, or people waving things at me. So the next step, where are we going with this course? So it's written in Carpentries Incubator. So to officially move to beta from alpha, we need to add some instructor notes. And that's one of the key things in the incubator. So we're working on that at the moment. We're also in the process of developing presentations to support delivery of the workshops. In the previous workshops so far, we've delivered through this traditional carpentry thing of showing the material on the screen and working through it, and then people do and we do and things like that. But actually, because this is much less practical and technical than usual carpentry stuff, having presentations to support it rather than just the standard carpentry material would improve the training a lot. We think we've had that feedback from people already. And I have an open question about what are the training resources need to support RSEs and understanding reducing emissions. I think there's a combination of technical courses of specific areas. We can look at this one's particularly tuned to HPC, but could be changed and expanded for different areas and things like that. If you want to come along to the course, the next run is going to be at the University of Birmingham on the 22nd of October, I think. It could be the 21st because my memory is going. But if you look at the Archer 2 website, which is the UK National HPC Service, just Archer 2 AC UK, on the training section there, you can register and come along to the training. I think after that, we'll be hoping to offer an online version as well, just to reach people. So we did an online version. We've done 2 in-person ones. We're doing another in-person one. So I think after that, the next one will be an online version as well, offered through Archer 2. Again, so I'm happy to take questions on this, but I think there was some sort of plan to do a broader activity around questions for training in green stuff for software from Joe. I'll stop there.
Thank you so much. Yeah.
Do you want me to try and answer these questions?
Yeah.
So I'll go for it. So do I think there's a way to connect all the different green courses together? So I think possibly. It depends on whether a useful thing would be a green curriculum for different types of stakeholders. So maybe users of DRI, RSEs, and things like that. So definitely there's potential there. And I know Carpentry's done curriculum and link things together. However, I do think there's benefit in having standalone courses that just stand on their own feet. Can RSE learn to deliver this course in person? Is it open source? Yes, it is. If you miss the QR code on the final slide, then you can just grab me. I'm just sat here, and I will point you at where it is. It's on Carpentries Incubator, which is an open source place, a neutral open source place. So we welcome contributions as well. So if you find that something you think that could be improved, then please put in a PR, and that can go in. So trainings in person, thoughts on a pre-recorded version. So there is on the Archer 2 website in the past training sessions a pre-recorded version of the online version we did. We don't tend to record the in-person things, but if there's an online version, of course, it gets recorded as part of Archer 2 training and then made freely available on YouTube for everybody. So there is a version. It was the first run of the course, so it may be slightly more sketchy than we've got a bit better at delivering it now. But as I say, there'll be another one, and that'll get recorded, hopefully later in the year. And then that will be available through the Archer 2 website and the YouTube channel forevermore, or as long as YouTube stays up.
So next we're going to have a sort of slightly more extended discussion about training, and it's going to be interactive. So there's going to be a Mentimeter here. So hopefully that's going right online. I guess it is if we're still sharing the screen. So there's going to be 7 questions, and we kind of want to get, this is not just focus on HPC anymore. This is sort of about green RSE topics more generally. So yeah, there's a code at the top there for the Mentimeter. I do also have a QR code somewhere. There you go. There's a QR code here if you prefer. The code is 52374795. It's there at the top.
Is aware of a few things more than somewhat knowledgeable or less than somewhat knowledgeable?
But they've reordered themselves now. They were in an order, so not heard about it before today is the least, and then aware of a few things is the second least.
You got the QR code?
Yes, and then somewhat knowledgeable, proficient, and then expert is the most. Everyone got the Mentimeter? Yeah, so just to repeat that, not heard about it for today is clearly the least, and then aware of a few things, and then somewhat knowledgeable is sort of in the middle. Proficient is that you're quite you know quite a bit about green RSE type things, and then expert is of course, but you're very much au fait with it.
So there's a green SIG channel on the conference Slack, which I just stuck the Mentimeter number in.
About 50 people that have connected, and most of the people have voted. I'll give it a little bit longer. So it looks currently like there's either 0 or 1 person that's an expert. Not many people hadn't heard about it, which is good. And then we've got quite a few people sort of in between. It's probably roughly what we expected. It even looks like it could. Oh, actually, no, it's not quite normally distributed. But there's a few different questions, so we'll move on to the next one for now. So this one's a free text one. So where do you need more support on green RSE topics? So we've had a few different presentations today. Maybe there's something from those that you'd like to know more about, or maybe there's a completely different part of RSE work that you want to know about how to sort of embody green RSE practices. Maybe there's something else that we've not even really thought about. But this is, yeah, sort of about the training side of things. So is there something that we could provide training for that there either already is training for or that there isn't yet? There's an interesting point here. Is it just making things run faster? We're going to have a bit of a breakout later, so maybe that's something that will come up again that people can discuss. Support on how to move away from US data centers is another interesting point. There's a few different bits about benchmarking here. So is that like HPC benchmarking or more generally, or? Groups? Let me try that. Trying to group them together. Okay, so there is quite a few different people saying benchmarks, standardized benchmarks. We'll go on to the next one. So what topics should green RSE training in reducing emissions cover? So this is very related to the last question, but it's kind of like, what should we be doing? Like, what's the sort of main things that you think are important for people to get training on? It might be the same answer as what you just put. There's a lot of stuff about efficiency here, how to write efficient code, how to write efficient software. Maybe there could be some green RSE related training on optimization, things like that. Green software patterns, yeah, that's quite an interesting idea. Use of AI is definitely a hot topic, yeah. It's, I've been asked to talk about that in a different session. Green AI. Loads of suggestions, which is really good. So thanks very much for that. We'll definitely sort of take all this on board for going forward with the green RSE SIG. And hopefully you'll have a chance to chat about this more in the breakouts later as well. So the next question is about, this is moving slightly away from training, and it's more about practice. So they're currently in order. So how much do you or your team practice green RSE? So have you not even considered it before today? That's the bottom one. And they've all moved. I should have numbered the actual text. Okay, so haven't considered before today is the bottom one, and then probably we've considered it. So we've either discussed it in a team, or I've thought about doing green RSE type things, but not actually implemented them. And then you've got some times where you have implemented green RSE practices in some of your projects or some of your activities. And then there's in most projects and activities. And then finally, you've got it's always the first consideration. So nice. Yeah, again, it's somewhere sort of in the middle. Well, a lot of people have considered it, but not really done it. So maybe this is something that we can address with training. But there is quite a lot of people that haven't considered it before today. So I guess even though people are aware of it, they've not really considered how to implement it in practice, which is quite interesting. I think we have two more. So this is another free text one. So what are you or your team doing that others might find useful? So do you have any tips? Very brief, like it doesn't need to be like a long description of what you do, but just like small things, like considerations for testing or CI, or I don't know, limitations on certain things or different policies. Okay, so someone's put modeling HPC system lifetime emissions, which is something that we've kind of heard a little bit about earlier. Using Code Carbon, yes, there's this plugin that you can get for your web browser that will sort of record or sort of estimate the carbon intensity of the different websites that you visit based on both the frequency. Well, I don't actually know exactly how it works, but probably it's based on the frequency anyway, and the power usage. Someone's put limiting the use of CI. Someone's put nothing. Encouraging working from home. So yeah, that's one that's a little bit more out of the box. You know, a lot of it we're often talking about what we're doing at work as opposed to like how we're working or where we're working. Benchmark has been mentioned again. Using a simulation into the matrix. Not flying to conferences. Yeah, again, that's another one that's more about where we're working rather than how we're working. Seems to have been there, so we'll go to the next one. This one I thought was a little bit of a different angle. So we're all sort of people in RSEs or related roles, and I think in most cases we will either have users or collaborators or both. So just pick whichever one's relevant to you, and put yourself on this scale from you strongly disagree to you agree about how your users and collaborators use resources responsibly or not, and whether it's something that's within your control. Because I thought this would be quite interesting. I mean, maybe there'll be a bimodal thing where one's for users and one's for collaborators. I don't know. It seems like people are fairly pessimistic about how responsibly their users and collaborators are using resources. But people are sort of somewhere in the middle, but with very wide distribution of whether it's in their control. So hopefully this is the kind of thing that, you know, if there's, with the green RSE type training that's out there, and potentially with more green RSE training, this is something that we could influence our users and collaborators by pointing them towards it. Perhaps there would be a need to tailor it a little bit towards different audiences. So, for example, if you're working with scientists rather than RSEs or whatnot. So that's definitely something that we can consider, because it seems like people think that we can have something, not something that's completely outside of our control. Is there one more? Oh yeah, sorry, there's one more in there, which isn't actually related to training at all. But just a last point on what's the biggest thing you can do as an RSE to reduce your greenhouse emissions. So, yes, that's related to what we said before, stop flying. Activism, again, another sort of perspective based on compared with what we were talking about before. My colleague to cancel S Interactive. God. Okay, yes, again, there's quite a few groups here of ones to do with flying, ones to do with diet choices. When live off grid. Oh yeah, okay. I knew that someone would put this. Do not use Gen AI. Yeah. How you store your data in the long term. Use analog computers. I like how these are getting slightly more jokey as they go along. So I think that's this is definitely the last one. So thanks very much everyone for your inputs there. Hopefully that's been sort of good to reflect on these different things, and hopefully it helps you to sort of get ready for the next session, which is going to be the breakout.
Thank you.
There's a lot we can do around training in terms of how we, as RSEs, can choose to potentially embrace it. Right, so we've got after these interesting talks, we'd have a discussion section. So this is kind of partly around thinking about what we as a Green RSE SIG can do, how we can kind of structure our work, what we can kind of do. So this link is in this, if you're on the conference Slack channel, there's a Green RSE session, the link's in there, or this QR code, which hopefully works. It's a slightly complicated one, so we have a little bit of introduction in terms of what we're going to get people to do. So, what we did last year at the Green RSE Feather session is that we basically had a long list of principles. So these are kind of statements which we felt the RSE community might kind of sign up towards, and they were structured around these greener principles. So they were kind of statements of the role of RSE within this net zero movement, green movement. And what we did is, so we asked people to rate the most important ones, and then we asked them to rate the easiest ones. And so then we kind of identified the principles which were, according to our community, both important and relatively easy. You see what I mean? So kind of the low-hanging fruit, essentially. And we've got 6 principles which came up as being both important and potentially achievable. They're grouped according to, so you see the word in the brackets is according to the principles. The first one is governance. Funding application for software projects and RSEs should include a sustainability component. So this might be something that we were to, for example, write a green RSE policy, might be something that would be included within that. So under responsibility 2, RSEs have a responsibility regarding the environmental impacts of the projects they're involved with. And the second one is sustainability should be formally part of some or all RSE job descriptions. And then the second set of principles are around estimation and education. So RSE should track the energy usage of the software they produce and use. RSE should develop consistent methodologies for estimating energy use. And RSEs should be trained in green computing best practices. Okay. So what we're going to ask you to do now is, if you go to the link, you'll get to a Google Doc, and there's lots of different tabs in the Google Doc. If you go to the tab of the number that your table that you're at, so table 4, table 1's over there, table 2, table 3, what we're going to do is we're going to ask you as a table to work together Basically, we'd like you to choose ideally 3 principles, if possible, and answer the following questions around them. So that one of the first questions are around the barriers. What are the main challenges that stop RSEs following this principle? What are the enablers? What would make it easier to follow this principle? Are there any examples of good practice, for example? Who should take responsibility for this principle? Should it individual RSEs, project PIs, institutions? And then the next steps, so like what could the Green RSE SIG do in the next 12 months to support this principle? And so we'd like you as a group to choose 3 principles and answer or discuss these 4 discussion points for each of those principles. Does that make sense? Excellent. How did we find that?
Good, yeah.
Frantic.
Mustafa?
Frantic.
Sorry. Do we have a few, we have about 5 minutes left. Does anyone have any thoughts they'd like to share in terms of how you find the exercise, or in terms of what you... We're really interested in like how these principles kind of fit within the RSE role, and what we can be doing to move these principles a little bit closer to kind of just something that's accepted and common in the RSE world. Does anyone have any thoughts, questions? Yes, hello.
Something we were just discussing is that it would be nice to have a resources page on the Green SIG to list all of the useful sort of methods and tools that we might come across.
We could do that. That's a good idea. Yeah. There's various bits and pieces floating around in terms of like green compute stuff. But yeah, it would be useful. I think particularly
Pages floating around, but maybe we should have one that's
just kind of
somewhat set.
updates it. Yeah. Yeah, no, that would be really useful. I think particularly from an RSE point of view, like if you're an RSE, this is what might be useful. One thing I was wondering about is like some kind of green RSE, like a who's who kind of style, where we got people to just very, very light touch say who they are, where they work, and what kind of thing they're interested in, and kind of have that as a community database or something like that, where people wrote their own entries. Would people, I'll do it just hands in the air, if that structure was there, would people be happy to write a little entry just saying who you are, what you're working on? It'd be quick. Excellent.
Yes, the is keeping up to date.
Yes, I think it would have to be that whoever, if you write your own entry, you've got edit rights, so you can delete it as you wish, or you can update it and an occasional reminder.
Could fit relatively well with the green disc, because that needs a sustainability lead for each
Yes.
Institution or group that does it.
Yes, so you could get the people that have done the green disc to kind of yeah. Yeah, that's a good idea.
I think one thing that's come up a couple of times, at least in our discussions on the principles, is there's lots of ideas. I think it's like case studies that show actual impact of implementing these ideas.
Yes.
So maybe one thing that we could do as a Green SIG is try and identify. So I mean, I guess Green Disc has something to say in that area as well.
Mm.
You know, we did Green Disc. It reduced our emissions here.
Yes. Yeah, kind of learnings from.
Sort of impact case studies.
Yeah.
People who've actually done things like, could I follow up the training with rather than feedback on the course, just longer term feedback and say, did this make any difference to how you behave?
Yes.
In your use of HPC, for example, will be a way of.
It'd be really interesting. It's quite hard data to collect because you're having to go back to people after the event.
Yeah, I think just on that, one of the things that came up is how difficult it is to measure this. And so actually, one thing that might be interesting to go after is more qualitative impact rather than quantitative. So, I trained 700 people in Green RSE, or 50 people in Green RSE, and then I had a conference presentation of somebody, or now my procurement team in my organization knows what the greener principles are. I think we might have to start there, because you know, it's such a complex thing, climate
Yes.
change.
Yeah.
We might have to go after qualitative impacts, which are still impacts.
Yeah. We're just less used to collecting them or
Yeah,
like making
as engineers, we don't like it. That's just
some numbers.
But it does actually work on the political level, on the climate
Yes.
change level. The stories are quite powerful.
So maybe we can get some help in terms of how we collate them or how we frame them.
I went to the Green SIG session at RSE Con, and then I went and had X conversations with
Exactly.
my organisation about
Yes.
doing things.
It's difference. Yeah, I think just collecting diverse evidence is a really nice kind of potential thing that GreenSig can do. So basically, I guess on that, if you know of people that are doing interesting stuff or you hear interesting stories, so GreenSig has a channel on the UK RSE Slack, a channel. So every so often people post either, you know, an interesting news article they've seen or an interesting paper or something like that. We're really kind of hoping to continue this discussion with the wider community as well. So it's not just the kind of and different kind of ways that we could kind of engage people. So one thing we've considered is doing, so the Turing Way does what they call fireside chats, which are kind of quite they're kind of like discussion sessions more than a seminar, if you see what I mean. So we did wonder about kind of trying to do some online meetups where we just kind of, not super frequently, every other month or something like that, where people can just drop in, have a chat, discuss the work they've been doing, get to know other people that work in this area. So again, kind of like show of hands. I know it's another thing to attend, but would a kind of informal thing be useful? I think it's okay.
I think it's as much as also for me, a lot of the time is it's great coming here because lots of people care, right?
Yeah.
It's a bit of like, because sometimes you meet quite a lot of people, even in your own organization, like, you know, why we bother?
Yeah.
Right? It's all too hard. It's all too difficult. It's all too big.
Yeah.
Right. And you're all here, right? You all care, right? And I think that's very useful for me personally to be able to go back and like, people do care.
Yeah.
Go away, naysayers. Let's do stuff.
Yes, no, it definitely helps. It really does. And I think having that community and like people kind of coming together, it's just, it can't be solved by one or two people working alone. It has to be solved. It's like Simon's talk this morning, like it has to be kind of community focused and kind of, it's a complex issue. We've got a lot of different knowledge and different skills within the room and within the wider community as well. And if we can harness that, then we've got some chance of kind of creating that change.
So I had one other thing that I thought might be interesting for people, particularly, well, probably only if you work in an English university. So I was speaking to Jeremy Cohen, who some people might know from Imperial, and he's successfully bid for every university in England gets money from Research England to change research, to do projects to improve research culture in the university, and you know, improving environmental research culture within universities. There's money you can bid for. It's probably undersubscribed in all UK universities.
Yeah.
To do small projects and things. So if you want to try things out and you work at an English university, I don't know if there's equivalent for Scotland. I'd still have to go and look, but there's probably a pot of money there in your university somewhere you could bid in to get little projects to try things and try out some of your time maybe and things like that.
It's a really good idea. And if you do share kind of what you've got and what was successful and things like that, because then we can all kind of learn.
We have used that sort of fund not with green initiatives, but to bootstrap similar kind of thing.
Right, we are exactly on 3 o'clock, so I'll let you all go and get coffee. Thank you so much